based on anecdotal evidence, Deanna, but New York makes very extensive use of muni meters on the street. And my experience has been that half the time they will not accept a credit card. In other words, they're designed to accept a credit card, but they won't accept a credit card. So then you go someplace and say, give me $5 worth of quarters, please, so I can feed the meter and pay for the maximum amount of time on the meter. It's strictly anecdotal, and I know the meter manufacturer will tell you that's not a problem. They work all the time, but I've had really bad experience with them.
Actually, we are having problems with American Express on our meters, so we have
right now is not user friendly with American Express.
Right, but if there's an actual for a credit card that it can accept, if there is an error reading it, then it does have a way to transmit a message to any number of people that are on the call list. So, we've given them a list of cell numbers and email addresses. So if there's any sort of errors like that, like it's run out of paper for your for your receipt, or if there's a jam, or if the money holder needs to be exchanged, it does send you all of those messages in real time, so you can quickly address things like that.
Message I get is your card has been rejected.
Sorry.
His card's been rejected.
It's like Obama.
Yes. Better check your wife's.
Should we take a little straw poll at this point about where people feel and maybe how, if you feel strongly or you're on the fence, or if you like one of these three options? Maybe.
Well, I also don't think we can ignore the savings. We could maybe pay for the sidewalks.
I'd like more of a comparison on a life cycle cost basis. It's hard for me to really understand if I look at let's say a 5-year cycle for any one of these options, what the real life cycle cost is going to be for that option. So that would be helpful to me.
Mr. Lebrun?
Well, I think that's fine with me. I mean, I was looking more at the post-pay gated solution as Rob was looking more towards. I think it's less of a change
Right.
than where we are now. So.
Ms. Butler, what do you feel?
I think that I don't feel terribly strongly about either of these. I just want whatever we have to work. So I guess I'd prefer maybe the post-pay simply because we do want to encourage people to go into the garages as opposed to the street if they're going to be there for a longer time. I feel like that's easier to manage, and if the merchants feel strongly about the post-pay, then I would support that.
Mr. Simon?
Yeah, and I also lean toward the post-pay gated solution.
Okay. All right. Well,
wait. I just want to try one more time. What about the post-pay sounds really good, but at least in the other system, if things don't work, everybody doesn't get stuck behind someone. Even when you have a person in the booth, there's someone who's digging for their change, or they can't find it, or their car gets stalled, and it's just so aggravating to be in the line of cars going out of the garage. So I just think the prepay eliminates that possibility, and I think it might be more inviting for everyone to go in the garage.
Well, yeah, I mean, what you say is right. If you're so impatient, you're in such a hurry. But you still have to stand behind somebody who can't work people can't do the prepay. So, they're still digging for their money or their credit card, and it doesn't work, and they don't know how to work the machine. You're still standing behind those people. Just you're not listening to music because you're not in your car.
That's true. Okay.
Okay. Well, it sounds like the post-pay is where people are headed. And to have a post-pay that has good technology, that they're going to, I don't know if there's something we can learn about getting a guarantee or something, because it was, One of those machines broke early on and was never fixed. It was pretty crazy.
You know, I didn't really understand the chart, the staff costs for just the manned booths that's not actually lower.
No, it's not lower. That's, I had researched with Palmer Square what they pay per garage for their staff costs, and then extrapolated a little bit based on a municipal payment, or a municipal rate rather than a private salary. And so just to man booths, irregardless of then the meter staff that we need to service the 1,100 meters in town, we would be looking at $400,000 just for the garage, manning the garage 24/7. So we would put on top of that the salaries of 4 employees that then deal with all the surface lots and the meters in town.
Okay.
So it's probably similar to what we're paying now, if not maybe more expensive, because right now the garage is unmanned from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m.
But would we have to get new technology for processing, or even if we have the manned, would we have to, or is that pretty simple?
Unfortunately, one of the problems with the manned booths, think about the entrances and the exits at the two, there's no room to put a booth at this point. So we have to think about that to the point that possibly out the back entrance, out to Wiggins, there may not be a booth. It may only be in. And then the booth and everything would have to be on Spring Street, so everybody would have to funnel out in one direction. So we've started to look at that, and it doesn't lay out very well right now.
Okay.
Already.
All right, do you have enough direction from us at this point? I think that was
We'll
a pretty...
proceed with investigating the post-pay.
Post-pay, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Poor Lee Solo has been waiting for this third ordinance introduction, so I'd like to flip that first, and then we can go back and do the street ones. So this is an ordinance by Princeton deleting the residential senior community 1 overlay zone, RCS1 district in the municipality, removing the RSC1 designation from the Princeton Township zoning map, and amending and supplementing the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968 in connection therewith. And if you remember, there was one property in here that was acquired by New Jersey Conservation Foundation already, and that the rest of the property in this overlay zone is in the open space element of the master plan. So this is really just cleaning things up, but I'm going to, since you're here, you should...
You took away what I was going to say.
Sorry.
I'll keep it short unless there are a lot of questions, as the mayor indicated. The RC1 zone, it's a 30-acre parcel of land. It's located in the Princeton Ridge. It has been the policy of the mayor and council to protect and preserve the environmentally sensitive portions of the ridge. The removal of the RSC1 overlay furthers this policy. Just briefly, the RC1 zone permits age-restricted housing at 3 dwelling units an acre, with a requirement that 20% of the units be set aside for affordable housing. It's an overlay zone, which means there's an underlying zone. The underlying zone is RA, RB, which allows single-family homes on 3 to 4 acre lots, and that's what it'll revert back to. In the cover memo and in the ordinance itself, you'll see we discuss a lot of the findings that have gone through, and the mayor had summarized in terms of open space and senior housing. So I won't repeat what's in there unless there is a question. This is seen more as furthering the policy of preserving the environmentally sensitive areas. I'll note in my report, there is an approval for age-restricted housing on this property. It goes back probably 7-8 years. The applicant then filed as allowed under the state law to convert that age-restricted housing to just regular market housing. Neither application has been active for a number of years, which leads to what the master plan said about preserving the open space. If the senior housing is abandoned or isn't going to go ahead, it should be preserved as open space. The acquisition of 4 acres sort of indicates that that project may be dead. We may hear at the public hearing otherwise, but we're looking to introduce this, send it to the planning board for their comment in terms of the master plan. I've given you a few in my report, comments regarding how it complies and doesn't comply with the master plan, but I think given the hour, I'll stop there and take some of your questions, if there are any.
Are there any questions, or is there a motion to introduce?
So moved. A second.
Moved by Ms. Crummiller and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries unanimously, and the public hearing for this ordinance will be on November 24th. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have 2 other ordinance introductions this evening, and then if people are willing, we'll just go through the rest of the agenda since we're all here. All right, so the first one is an ordinance creating no parking zones on Park Place and portions of Moore Street and Hamilton Avenue and amending the code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. Ms. Stockton?
This is more of a housekeeping ordinance introduction. We recently completed the improvements on Park Moore Van Divender, and as a part of that process, we review the existing signage that is in place to make sure that it is in good condition and that we don't have any side obstructions or other safety issues. So Sergeant Murray and I walked through the streets within these project limits and came up with the list that's included in this ordinance amendment of changes. We will only be losing 1 parking space in total out of this change. It's a non-metered spots. It's on Hamilton Avenue in front of the Kimball Funeral Home. Currently, if you're traveling northbound on Moore Street and you need to look to your right to cross over Hamilton Wiggins, when there are vehicles parked along the street in that area, it's very difficult to see. So what we're recommending doing is moving the no parking zone, extending it by 2 parking spaces. And then as you cross over the intersection on the southbound side of Moore Street, that's currently the high school parking zone, we'd be adding 1 parking space in that zone. So it's a net reduction of 1, but it's in 2 different areas. The 20-hour parking on Hamilton loses 2, and we gain 1 in the high school zone.
Would you allow Kimball to use the parking spaces during their services or whatever?
Yes, we currently allow them to do that in the no parking area, and we would continue to do that for their funeral services.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that question. Could you repeat it?
Yes, during their funeral services, I guess, they use those 2 spaces at times, the funeral home?
Right, what happens is they'll put cones out in the spaces, and I think maybe even on a portion of the no parking area to reserve areas for their clients. And so we would continue to allow that even if we move the no parking zone, extend the no parking zone.
Oh, okay. And so I take it then that you've consulted with Kimball and they're okay with this change?
If I may comment really quickly, if anything, it's going to benefit the Kimball Funeral Home with based upon the current arrangement that we have with them. The way that it's currently configured, those parking spaces are open to everyone, the ones that exist now. And just to backtrack a little bit, the intersection improvements that we made as far as reconfiguring where the sidewalk came out in order to improve sight distances and the safety of the intersection of Moore and Wiggins. If we didn't remove these two spots in conjunction with that, the improvements that we made to extending the sidewalk out closer wouldn't realize their full effect. So in essence, like Deanna said, we're removing two spots from Hamilton Avenue, but relocating one of those across the street on their Moore. As far as the Kimball Funeral Home is concerned, we would still honor the arrangement that we currently have with them. It's allowing temporary parking in front of the residents, but yet we would still feel the benefit there as well because those parking spaces would be shifted further east. The way it is right now is those two vehicles, in essence, would still remain close to the intersection of Moore and Wiggins. Does that make sense? No? Okay.
I thought I heard you say that they could still use those spaces, but now that doesn't seem to be what you're saying.
Well, they didn't, everyone had the right to use two marked stall spaces. That wasn't reserved for Kimball's alone.
I understand that.
Kimball's had to compete with those spots. So if they were filled at the time, then they didn't have those at their disposal. So now they would have those two spots at their disposal, but if we had 4 cars, for example, parked in the front of Kimball's, we would shift those 4 down. So in essence, would still increase the sight distance by 2 vehicle distances.
All right, so, but I think you've answered my question. Kimball still loses 2 spots effectively because those spots are shifted over. If those spots are open, they have access to them, plus they have access to the 2 no parking spots right now, right?
Yeah, if they had access to those, but there was no guarantee that they did.
I understand there's no guarantee. So my question becomes, has anybody actually consulted with Kimball's, and are they okay with this change?
I have not. I was going to reach out to them after we introduced this.
Right, I could comment on that because early on we had discussed making that revision, and at that time they said as long as we can park there when we have a funeral, we're okay. And that's the feedback I had received.
They're where they are now, or they're shifted? I mean, because that's... It's.
I think the reason, though, why they're shifting is for safety. So, and that they're allowed to park there during a funeral because they're putting up cones and it's a special circumstance. But the motivation behind this is to improve sight distance and make it safer.
If the ordinance is introduced, we'd certainly be willing to meet with them just to make sure they're clear on what's proposed. But my sense is, based on the prior discussion, they won't have any problem with it.
Yeah, I also mentioned at the agenda meeting when we had a brief discussion about this, this is something that's going to happen a lot as we get into redoing the roads in the borough, where we're going to have to shift some spaces because our sight triangles are not good at the intersections. And as we expanded those spaces over the years, especially where the meters are, we do have some areas that really do need to be cleaned up. So I think this is the first of what's going to be a lot of these processes as we clean up not only signage, but just do the reconstruction of the roads in the CBD extended areas. So I think we do need to do it. I mean, I know a lot of other areas we could point out, but we're not ready to make moves on those. So it is something that is really safety driven.
You know, when I go on that intersection, so I fully support this because it is, especially if it's like a big car, you know, like a truck or something, it does make it difficult to cross. So I'd like to move this.
I just like to add, I see no way that it would penalize, it would do anything other than help the Kimball Funeral Home staff.
I'll move it.
Ms. Carmiller has moved the ordinance, and Mr. Miller has seconded it. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Carmiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the public hearing for this ordinance will be on November 10th. And then the next ordinance is an ordinance by Princeton regulating parking along portions of Hamilton Avenue and amending the code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And this is for the installation of bike lanes along Hamilton Avenue. And Deanna, can you just give a brief summary of this?
Sure. As you heard in the Poe Road discussion, whenever we have a capital project, we look to see how to incorporate the Complete Streets policy in that project. And because Complete Streets was new to our community in the operational sense, we are working with the Bike Ped group as well as TNT to review projects and look for complete street solutions. So both the Bike Ped group as well as TNT have endorsed the installation of bike lanes on this section of Hamilton that runs from Harrison Street to Snowden Lane. And in order to include bike lanes on those roads, there's currently no parking on the north side of Hamilton. This would require no parking as well on the south side of Hamilton within that section of the project limits. So what we've brought to you is that recommendation to eliminate parking on the south side of Hamilton.
A question? Have we met with the neighbors in regard to that? I know we were saying.
We did. We held a neighborhood meeting with the neighbors, and there was concern about eliminating the on-street parking. And because we had the other two advisory committees that recommended going ahead with the bike lanes, that's why we're bringing it to council for your determination of how you want to proceed with this.
Mr. Simon?
I'm very familiar with that neighborhood as I live a block from that. And I really feel like this is a bit of taking Complete Streets too far. I think when the public hears Complete Streets, they hear share the road. And this feels a little bit more like take the road away from me, or at least my parking spots. And for many of the residents, under normal use, their driveway is sufficient. But that's not, I don't think that's true necessarily for all of them, and it's certainly not true when they have any kind of a social gathering at their homes. And that would actually be a significant inconvenience for the residents along that stretch. I would support Sharrows, which is exactly what exists on Hamilton on the other side of Harrison. But I'm not in favor of this. I think it would create a backlash. In fact, I think it would significantly reduce, if this is the kind of decision that we make on a routine basis, it would significantly reduce support for Complete Streets within the community. And so I would recommend that we go with a different approach like Sharrows.
Yeah, Ms. Crumler?
I can't find the document, but I wasn't clear on whether having one bike lane in one direction only, does that require cutting down trees? The option to have one bike lane on one side and Sharrows on the other?
No, that we could incorporate that within the existing road width.
Because that seemed like a good option to me. I mean, I kind of agree with...
Can I make a recommendation, actually? Because I think if this is going to generate, I think this is a difficult one, and I would recommend that we put this back on the agenda at our next meeting,
that's a good
and then
idea.
we can get through some of the rest of this.
I agree, wholeheartedly.
All right, so, to be continued.
Need to move to table it? Is that what we're doing?
I don't know if we need to table it. I think we just put it on the agenda again.
No.
Okay, so for the resolutions, we've taken care of number 1 and number 3. And I would just ask if there's any questions anybody has. A lot of these seem pretty routine.
Can I move the rest in block?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Butler and seconded by Mr. Liverman, and I just want to make sure there's no other questions. And if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that was efficient. Next is the consent agenda, which I don't have to read. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I do have a question on one.
Yeah.
The plastic bag referendum,
Oh, yeah, let's pull that one.
Which one?
From the consent agenda.
14-328.
Number 15, the last one. So can you just change your motion to be 1 through 14 of the consent agenda?
So moved.
And, okay, moved by Ms. Butler and seconded by Ms. Krummeller. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the 1 through 14 passed unanimously, and now we have item 15, which is the resolution endorsing the Mercer County non-binding plastic bag referendum. Is there a discussion on this, or should we just take a voice vote?
Actually, I'd like to hear
Okay.
Mr. Levin's concern.
I know it's late. I don't want to, I read the whole page, but basically, my concern, and I, it's not that I'm against not using plastic bags. I think we should use canvas bags. I think we should also use paper bags, and I'm totally fine with that. My family, when we go shopping, that's what we do. The problem I have is I just can't vote on anything that unfortunately pertains to an increase in food costs. I know this sounds very, very, very strange, but there's an increase in cost, and I just can't vote for that. The recent Senora packing program that was spearheaded by Human Services under the chair, Ross Wishnick, leadership, have begun to address this, and I call it an underground society of residents that are actually needing food. And this is done by providing food for children over the weekends. 5 cents doesn't seem like a lot, but when you have nothing, cents can make a big difference. We had a lady recently that had come to our church with a 5-month-old baby that needed milk, and she approached us, and her mind she wasn't thinking about a plastic bag, she wasn't thinking about a paper bag, she wasn't even thinking about a canvas bag or the aftermath of what happens to a plastic bag. But when life throws you curves, like it evidently thrown her curves, she's basically thinking about survival. And the way that our church works, we take donations once a month for our food pantry, and we then use these funds to buy food vouchers. And when you're talking hundreds of dollars or thousands at the end of the year, that $25 or $30 or $40 is a big difference in some people's to have food, to purchase food. So even though this 5 cents seems very little to us, in the scheme of things, it is actually going to prevent $40 to $50 of somebody having food. And because of that, as someone that has worked with food insecure people in Princeton for over 20 years, I just can't vote for it. Not that I'm saying this is a negative resolution. It's just that I just can't vote for any cost anywhere in food today. Not when I see people that need food. And even though it's 5 cents, any cost, I just can't vote for. So that's just me.
I would be willing to support this if it had a hardship exemption, but Mercer County did not choose to pass it that way, and I'm not going to support it either.
I know it's not part of this resolution. I have a statement from Brian Hughes, the county executive, that he would want to provide reusable bags to anybody who needed them. So I think this is all fairly theoretical because even if it passes, there's no fee. It's just recommending that there would be. So I think it was to enable the county to have a conversation on how they would implement a program, and certainly I think making sure that it's not going to have a negative economic impact on people is going to be an important factor.
It's also, you can also argue that right now everyone is paying for the plastic bags because there is no such thing as free.
I understand that, but I also don't think they cost 5 cents and per bag. And I'm supportive of the effort, and I have done bring my own bag. I hopped on that bandwagon. But I agree with Councilman Liverman. This, as it's worded and as it's proposed, does not offer adequate protection for the most vulnerable, and I'm not willing to support it.
Ms. Butler?
I'm just wondering why this is on, did we agree that we would take a vote? Is that what we told? Why are we not looking at the other ballot initiatives too, I guess?
Because it was just somebody who came at the last meeting, I think it was.
Is this in response to Daniel Harris?
It was Bainey Surrey and Daniel Harris came to the last meeting, and I think there was a lot of support from council at the time they spoke, and they said, please, would you pass a resolution? And I said I'd put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Right, and they, the language here is a little different than what was presented to us. What was presented to us was we want to start a conversation. This is saying we want a 5-cent fee. I mean, it is a little bit different.
Well, why don't we just vote on it?
Okay.
I'll move it.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller. Is there a second? Okay. I guess there's not a second. So then, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
I'm glad there's a second for that. All in favor?
Aye.